If a man gathers 10,000 suns in his hands, if a man seeds 100,000 worlds with his sons and daughters, granting them custody of the galaxy itself, if a man guides 1,000,000 vessels between the infinite stars with a mere thought, then I pray you tell me, if you are able, how such a man is anything less than a god. Lorgar Aurelian, Primarch of the Word-Bearers.
Father. He whispered the word against the wailing sirens. Lightning arced in panicked flashes between overloading generators, killing men, women, and other machines with impunity. His presence was a violation, a profane corruption of the most sacred ground, yet the burden of confusion paralyzed him. Weakness flooded his flame-wreathed form as it never had before in his demigod's lifespan. The cavern before him was only a laboratory in the most poetic sense. He looked with flaming eyes upon the inside of a god's mind, where a cityscape of machinery and snarled utopia of cables reflected the synapses and sections of a human brain. At the core was a throne of gold, once coldly serene, now spitting acetylene sparks, bright enough to sear even eyes made of fire. He felt the heat of pursuit behind him, the ripples of the warp's billion predators spilling into the latticework of tunnels in his wrathful wake. They came in a laughing, howling horde, inexorable as any flood, inevitable as the rolling slide of lava. And he knew then what he had done. He had led them here. The only being powerful enough to breach the final barriers around the Imperial dungeon had carved a path and paved a way for them. The warning he had come to give faded from his lips. The sirens. The sirens howled on and on. Warriors of the 10,000, clad in gold and ringing their king, shouted and fired skywards. Their incendiary rounds dissolved within his towering form, their rage coming to nothing. Even the custodians didn't know him. He knew each of them by name. There was Constantine Valdor. There was Ra Endymion. There was Aemon Tauromachien. Yet they leveled their spears at him and opened fire. Good men, men with philosophical souls and unbreakable loyalty, seeking to destroy him. His father stood at the heart of the storm, looking up at him, looking up at the burning herald of humanity's end. Every other soul in the chamber, the menials and workers and scientists not already aflame or fleeing the cascade of klaxons, stared up with their king. The fiery form was the last thing many of them saw, for its violent luminescence stole their sight forever after. The Emperor looked upon him, his son, his creation, with eyes that had seen countless suns and civilizations die. "Magnus," he said. "Father," breathed the avatar of burning misery in reply.
In the deep future, in the 29th millennium, there exists a man of terrible intellect, terrible power, and he is dwelling within inside of a secret research complex buried deep, deep beneath the Himalayan mountains in the roof of the world. And this man has a plan, not just for himself, but for humanity in general, for the species. But within this plan, the seeds of heresy and chaos are sown. It is due to this man's terrible intellect and might that will see all of his plans in the future come undone. The man that I speak of is none other than the Emperor of mankind, and where he is right now is inside of his secret laboratory at the very beginnings of the Primarch project. The project to create 20 post-human demigod super beings to lead his legions of transhuman, genetically modified super soldiers clad in power armor on a conquest of the galaxy to reclaim mankind's birthright. And even before the first Primarch has been created, it has set in motion a chain of events that will see humanity be brought to its highest highs and then its lowest of lows. For there are 2 Primarchs that he has created that will do the most damage to his vision for the species. And I feel like the damage that was inflicted upon him was self-inflicted due to arrogance and hubris. The issue that I speak of is the decision to not tell his sons, the Primarchs, of the powers in the warp. Because the Primarchs themselves are products of the warp itself. Since he has gone into the gate at Molech and spent time within the warp itself, he has gained the knowledge on how to make these Primarchs. He has made 20 of them. 2 of them are unknown, for they have been purged from Imperial records. But the ones that he has created are some of the most advanced and powerful beings in the galaxy, second only to himself and Malkador the Sigillite. Now, the reason why I say it was a mistake, and that it is the peak of hubris and arrogance, is because of how the Emperor goes around things. So, how the Emperor went around and consolidated power by manipulation, by lying, and just not caring about what people are doing, like how people are, like how humanity is. I feel like the Emperor is so disconnected from humanity itself that in all of his terrible intellect, he has forgotten that we are still hairless apes upon a floating rock in space, and we will go to our rudimentary instincts to survive in just how we are. Because the reason for example, there being the Mechanicum on Mars, the Adeptus Mechanicus, is all due to his manipulation. See, the Emperor has something called foresight. He's able to go ahead and see alternate timelines and see what could happen. Now, this sight is not, this clairvoyance is not perfect. It's not 100%. If I remember correctly, he did see a period of time where there was war, civil war, and something really bad has happened, but it's like looking through a foggy window, seeing something in the distance, a great fire, but not knowing why it's on fire or what's on fire. All you know is that something happened, but you can't quite tell exactly what it is. I believe it is in Master of Mankind, where he was explaining his sight to Ra and Dimion, one of the coolest custodies right next to Constantine Valdor, about his foresight. He can see kind of the destination, but the path to get there is difficult. And sometimes he can't even see exactly what is at the end of it, just that something is there. And the Mechanicum, he foresaw that they would be his greatest armorer, his armory, those who will support him with raw materials, forges, foundries for his war machine. So, back in the medieval era, when the Emperor was walking amongst man, unknown, he fought and killed a shard of a Catan known as the Void Dragon, This is where we get, in-universe of course, the story and mythology of St. George the Dragon Slayer. So what he did was he imprisoned it underneath Mars, knowing that the Catan in this specific shard of the Catan can influence machinery, thus starting the cult of the Omnissiah, the machine god. And after he conquered Terra, he went to Mars knowing full well that this civilization has sprung up and has started worshipping the machine god. So he manipulated the priests of Mars by coming down and using the Void Dragon's essence to repair machinery as if it were his own abilities, convincing the tech priests to follow him as the physical manifestation of the Omnissiah. And that is why most of the Mechanicum view the Emperor as the Omnissiah that has been brought into being physically, and therefore stand with the Imperium as their main weapon supplier, repair factories, foundries for everything and anything you can think of is produced by the Mechanicum, or the Adeptus Mechanicus, as it is known in the 41st millennium. So, that is one example of the Emperor's manipulation of an issue for his own and the species' benefit. The other issue is him not telling Magnus about the beings, the malevolent consciousness in the warp, and the dangers of dealing with these entities. And I feel like if he were to have told Magnus that of everything that's in the warp, Magnus would have a greater understanding and a greater guard against the forces of, say, for example, Tzeentch, the chaos god of magic, deception, trickery, intrigue, all that good stuff right there. Because as we know now, he is a demon Primarch of Tzeentch. And when it comes to Lorgar, the Emperor has banned almost all religion from the Imperium in 30k during the Great Crusade. He didn't want anybody seeing him as a god. He didn't want anybody worshipping any gods, because he wanted to starve the chaos gods of followers. But Lorgar, when he landed upon Colchis is a planet steeped in religious fanaticism. Now, the religious fanaticism when it comes to Colchis was actually that of the primordial truth, otherwise known as the Four Gods of Chaos, although they went under a different name on that planet. And the heads of that planet, notably Corpharon and Erebus, they have completely... Well, no, I don't think Erebus was around at that time, but I know Corpharon was. Corpharon and Lorgar conquered the world in a religious war that saw many millions of people dead and just decimated. And this was all in favor for their religion. But Lorgar, as well as being a Primarch, also has an ability. He has very good psychic abilities, and he had a dream that a golden man will arrive at Colchis, and he attributed that golden man to be God, the God. And overnight, he has turned the planet into worshipping this golden god, this man that will descend from the stars and take the species to newer heights. A few years go by, and his visions come true. Now here's the issue. Lorgar celebrated with the planet for days on end in religious ceremonies devoted to the Emperor in his presence, and the Emperor did nothing to stop it. The Emperor accepted Lorgar's fealty and gave him the Imperial Heralds which would now be known as the Word Bearers Space Marine Legion. This legion would go from planet to planet, and they would conquer it, bring it into compliance, and stay there for years and years, and uproot the planet's culture and religious foundations, and replace them with the cult of the Emperor, the Imperial cult. Because Lorgar and the Word Bearers worship the Emperor as a deity. And the worlds that they would leave behind were very, very stable, very, very loyal, but highly religious to the Emperor. It's almost on a parallel, same coin, different sides, as the Ultramarines. The Ultramarines would conquer a planet and completely redo its infrastructure, make sure everything's stable, and then be on their way. The Word Bearers did this as well, but did it at a snail's pace to make sure that the world remained loyal to the Emperor, and religiously loyal to the Emperor. Now, the Emperor caught wind of this, and he wanted to know, why are you lagging behind all of your brothers when it comes to compliances on these planets? The thing is, the problem where everything started in earnest, the seeds of heresy were sown long before, but this is where things started kicking up a gear. Instead of talking to Lorgar and explaining to him why he is the way he is and why he's not a god, what he does is he orders Roboute Guilliman in the 13th Legion, the Ultramarines, to the world of Monarchia. Oh no, it wasn't the world of Monarchia, it was the city of Monarchia. I cannot remember the name of the planet itself, but they ordered the evacuation of the entire planet, and they annihilated it. Annihilated the planet in nuclear fire. The highest structure left there was a pile of bricks about 4 feet high. And what happened was the planet was allowed to send out one distress call in 7 days' time that would lure the Word Bearers in force to the planet to see what happened. And then, as Lorgar is giving a speech to his legion about, we will find out who did this, why they did this, his communications are overrun fleet-wide by Roboute Guilliman, telling them to take the entire legion and land in the city. Now, not only is that incredibly disrespectful to cut off a Primarch when he's addressing his legion, it's also the way that they had him go to the planet itself, guarded by Ultramarine fighters on the way there. They escorted him personally down to the planet as if he were some sort of lowly prisoner. Even the Space Marines, Argel Tal and his chapter mates of the Serrated Sun, mentioned this, like, why are they doing this to us? They're treating him like a criminal. And all of the Word Bearers, the entire Legion, stood in the ashes of Monarchia, and Lorgar was called to the front, and Malcador the Sigillite was explaining to him why they were here, what happened, and Lorgar is understandably very upset as to what's happening, and he smacks Malcador, like sends him flying a good 5-7 feet back. The old man, of course, stands up, brushes it off, and Lorgar tells Roboute, who is standing there stoically, that when the Emperor finds out about this, and Malcador just says he already knows. In fact, he's here. The Emperor comes down. Now, when it says it in the book, it's either he's personally there, or it is a psychic, manifestation of his presence. And he forces all of the Word Bearers and Lorgar to kneel in the ashes before him, Malcador, Rabute, Gilliman, and the entirety of the Ultramarines in fealty to scorn him publicly and humiliate him as to, cut this out, I am not a god, you need to stop this and get these compliances up and running, because this is unacceptable. And I feel like it was the destruction of Monarchia and the humiliation of the Wordbearers Legion in front of the Ultramarines that has kickstarted the heresy. And I fully believe that if it was taken differently and Lorgar was not publicly humiliated in front of his brother and his brother's legion, and explained this by the Emperor himself in Malcador, I feel like the future of the Imperium would have taken a very different turn. Because all this did was create resentment inside of Lorgar's heart. And he was a broken man. And the one thing that Lorgar searches for most, and is the most human of all of his traits, is he wants the truth. He wants to be told the truth of the universe. He thought the Emperor was the truth, that he was a god. And he quickly found out that, no, this is not the truth. The Emperor is extremely powerful and could very well be a god, but there's something more here. And that led him on a spiritual journey to the Eye of Terror after meeting with the original inhabitants of what would become Cadia. And after the revelations of the Eye of Terror, what happened to the Eldari Empire, and what forces reside within the warp itself, Lorgar was very troubled. But he found the primordial truth of what he was looking for. And it was reminiscent, actually it was the very same, as the religion that he fought for and then turned away on Colchis. Now the two biggest instigators for this are Corferon, who was elevated to being a half Astartes. Not a full Astartes, but halfway there because he was old by the time he was ascended. And Erebus, the chaplain of the Wordbearers. They were planting doubts in Lorgar's ears during the entire time of his contemplation of what happened, that the Emperor was not worthy of being worshipped, that there's something else out there. Maybe we should return to the old ways, because that worked out for us before. And so that led them down the path to chaos, and Erebus and the other chaplains would go to other legions with varying degrees of success for each one to introduce things called the Warrior Lodges, where they would start to slowly inject the poison that would be chaos into the legions. Some legions didn't want anything to do with them or their Warrior Lodges. They may have had something similar set up before, and they didn't need their services. So they targeted specific legions. The Iron Warriors, the World Eaters, the Death Guard, so on and so forth. And they would start to slowly spread the corruption. And this is what transpired into the Horus Heresy, is those that were part of the lodge would be spared, and those that were not part of the lodge would be seen as loyalist to the Emperor, and they would be purged accordingly. And the Wordbearers didn't really do this in one grand spectacle like on Istvan III. They purged their loyalists over the course of 45 to 50 years before that, so they were already tainted by chaos long before the events of Istvan 3 and 5. So the Warrior Lodges served as a separator between those who are loyal to the War Master and their Primarchs, and those that are loyal to the Emperor. And this all culminated in the Istvan 3 massacre, where the loyalist Space Marines from the Emperor's Children, World Eaters, and Sons of Horus were sent down to the surface under false pretenses and then slaughtered. And it was a very painful moment of betrayal for the loyalist forces sent down there. And thus started, it basically kicked off the Horus heresy, because after that, the ship, the Eisenstein, fled the system with Nathaniel Garrow and a few loyalist counterparts from the Death Guard Legion, fled to warn the Emperor of this treachery. They met Dorn and they explained it there. Garrow nearly got killed by Dorn, but they got him to see the light of the subject. But even before that, that was talking about Lorgar's plans. Let's talk about Magnus. Now, Magnus is a trouble figure. I know there's memes around there that say, Magnus did nothing wrong, all that good stuff, right? Magnus did everything wrong, but he was also kind of fucked over. So, the Emperor, at the behest of Mortarion and Leman Russ, conveyed the Council of Nicaea. And the result of that Council of Nicaea was the abolition of the librarian forces within the legions of the Space Marines, which means psychers that acted as a psychic weapon for the legions were to be outlawed, and they were to be reconstituted within the legion as standard battle brothers. And this was specifically targeted at Magnus by Leman Russ and by Mortarion. But the thing about it is incredibly unfair, because the entire purpose of Magnus was to be basically second or third in power within the realm of psyker activities to the Emperor Malkador. And his entire legion had a very heightened chance of them having psyker abilities. And this really put a handicap on their legion and on their Primarch, because that's his main bread and butter right there, is psychic abilities and communing with the warp. So Magnus, being Magnus, saw that as incredibly unfair and continued to do his research and experimentation in secret against the commandments of the Emperor at Nicaea. Now, the Emperor, I believe that this was a massive, colossal fuck-up. And he should not have listened to Mortarion or Leman Russ, because honestly, they can go fuck themselves. Leman Russ is okay, but Mortarion is just absolutely terrible as a person. He's a vindictive, petty son of a bitch, even on the same level or worse than Perturabo. Now, the issue is that when Horus was wounded upon the moon of, he was wounded on Davin, and he was brought to a religious temple to get quote-unquote healing, because, Erebus stole the Anathame blade from the Interrex. The Interrex then attacked the Sons of Horus, and the Imperium retaliated in kind, and he gave the Anathame to a planetary governor that Horus instilled personally, and then told him that, hey, the governor that you have installed has turned renegade. And so Horus went to go fight him. Horus was stabbed by the Anathame blade and was on death's doorstep. And he was brought to the Snake Temple for the Davanites to see if they can mend his soul in some sort of arcane magic ritual, which is a huge goddamn no-no to a lot of the Legion, and especially to the Emperor. Few of them were heavily against this, but the others were brought on by despair. They were distraught, and they wanted to save their Gene Father in any way that they could. And Erebus took on the face of Hastur Sejanus. Hastur Sejanus was a beloved commander of Horus, who died in the beginning on stages of the Battle of 6319. He was murdered by the false emperor, and that drove Horus to annihilate that culture, basically. Well, not the culture, but the emperor himself. And Erebus wanted to go ahead and see if he can use that to convince Horus to join on the side of Lorgar and of chaos in general. He showed him visions of the future, where Horus is like, wait a second, I see statues of some of my brothers, but where am I? Where are the statues of the others? What is going on here? Why is this place so shitty? It's religious. And Erebus, while disguised as Hastur Sejanus, was trying to tell him that this is the future the Emperor wants. The Emperor wants to become a god and wipe you out of the equation. Now, the visions of the future that Erebus was showing him were factual. That is the 41st millennium. That is the reality of the Imperium of Man at that time. What he did not tell him was that this is the result of your actions. You drove the Imperium to be like this. He didn't tell them that, of course not. It is a twisted lie of omission. This enraged Horus, but while he was trying to communicate with him, Magnus caught wind of some psychic disturbance within the warp. I feel a disturbance in the Force. And he decided to psychically he wanted to astral project to Horus, be like, do not listen to this snake. And he basically rips off Erebus's face and shows him who he actually is. And Horus looks at him and is like, why were you lying, bro? And you, Magnus, why are you here? Didn't our father forbid you from doing anything like this? Both of you suck. Get out of here. And they both left, but Horus was swayed by Erebus at the end to throw in his lot with chaos, because he wanted to save the galaxy from the future that he was shown. But as like Greek myths, when it comes to the prophecies by the Oracle of Delphi, the more you try to resist a prophecy, the more you try to change the outcome, the more likely you are to cause said outcome. So, Magnus left and tried to astral project to their father. Now, their father at this time has left the Great Crusade and went back to Terra to work on a top secret project that he didn't tell his children about. Well, his children, the Primarchs, his sons about, which he definitely should have, but it was something called the Webway Project. His goal was to move all of humanity into the Webway and use that for travel instead of the warp, because the warp is inherently dangerous. But he didn't tell any of his sons the reason why he was leaving. Didn't give them any warnings or anything like that. So when Magnus tried to astral project to Terra to warn the Emperor of Horus's betrayal, he kind of broke down a barrier, a psychic barrier put up by the Emperor to protect his project. And a voice from the warp was like, with a little bit of help, I can help you tear down these barriers, and we can warn the Emperor. And Magnus was like, yeah, bet, let's do it. And he tore down the barriers into the webway. But doing that opened up a floodgate for demons to pour through into the webway to permanently ruin the project. And when Magnus appeared in the laboratory where his father was, it caused so much chaos, death, and destruction to the mortals there. People's eyes were burned out of their sockets witnessing this demigod appear from the warp, wreathed in fire and flame. Computers exploded. Alarms chimed. The custodians rushed in to deal with Magnus. Magnus like, I know your name. I know who you are. Why are you firing upon me? And then the Emperor looks up and just says, Magnus. And Magnus like, Father, And the Emperor is like, no, I don't want to hear it. Get the hell out. In fact, actually, I'm going to go ahead and have you brought back to Terra in chains to answer for your crimes here. And he basically tells Magnus to fuck off and poofs him out. And the Emperor calls up Leman Russ and says, hey, I need you to drag Magnus the Red to Terra and his legion to answer for what they have done. And Leman Russ is like, alright, say less. And he goes off to do it. Horus reaches out to Leman Russ, this is before he was openly a traitor, and says, hey, so the Emperor has given me, the War Master, new information and new orders. Kill Magnus the Red. And Leman Russ does it. He accepts it because he believes that the War Master, Horus, is still loyal, and his title of War Master comes directly from the authority of the Emperor. And that starts off as pushing Magnus into the hands of chaos when Leman Russ breaks his back over his knee. Magnus is swept away by the forces of the war and saved. Zinch also promised him a cure for the flesh change, which was a genetic issue with the Thousand Sons that caused them to basically turn into a chaos spawn after a while, but that's a topic for another video. But this is just a highlight of the issues that the Emperor, the decisions that the Emperor made that just did not work out well, and in fact doomed him to failure. Because after Magnus ruined the Webway project, there was no turning back. The Emperor knew everything was fucked. It was bad. He had to sit upon the Golden Throne and hold back the portal of the demons so they don't overspill into Terra. So, all in all, the Emperor has done this to himself by being paranoid, overly secretive, and just not a good father for his sons. And that is basically the story of how the Emperor fucked himself up.
Grand tragedy. Who cares? God, pain!
focus on more pressing terrestrial matters. Masons, enter that library and burn it to the ground! Burn their codes! Use the torches! Refuse to...
There was a beggar who lived on my street, always going on and on about food.
Jeez. That hurt like the devil. Janky.
Get up! You don't want to miss what I do next.
You don't think I gave up that? With no use. You're nuts. Grand tragedy. Leave no one alive! Lay them out, lads!
Send the Arrogance to their graves!
Oh, nah.
Slay them!
Their library is almost completely consumed by flame!
Sort them all out!